Welcome to Easy English, your go-to channel for improving your English and life.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Easy English, your go-to channel for improving your English and changing your life. I'm Antony, your host, and as usual, I'm joined by my amazing co-host Sarah.
Hey Antony, hey everyone, thank you for joining us. Today's topic is an interesting one.
Yes, Sarah, we will talk about the problem of being ambitious but lazy.
You know that feeling? Your mind is just buzzing with possibilities. These amazing projects, maybe new habits, the person you really want to become.
Oh, yeah.
But then when it's actually time to get started, you just hit this invisible wall. You're, full of ambition. You've got this clear picture, but taking that consistent action, it feels like running in place.
It really does. It's this paradox, isn't it? Being ambitious, but, finding yourself putting things off again and again.
Exactly. And it's a very common human experience, that gap between what we aspire to and, our actual follow through.
It is. We tend to think ambition and, hard work just naturally go together.
Right.
But for so many people, there's this constant struggle to really bridge that divide. It's like an internal tug of war.
Yeah, the desire is absolutely there.
But the drive, the consistent action isn't always quite keeping pace.
And I bet a lot of you listening have felt this, even if it's maybe not something you talk about much.
Oh, for sure.
You see others seemingly making constant progress, and you might think, okay, why does this feel so much harder for me? Well, look, this deep dive is all about unpacking that ambitious but lazy puzzle.
Right.
We're going to explore what's really going on there, beneath the surface, why it's so common.
And crucially, how we can start connecting those big dreams with our actual, everyday actions.
Yeah, we've looked into quite a range of sources for this.
No love. Everything from analyses of this specific mindset, this personality type,
to really practical strategies you can actually use.
and even some, surprising examples of really successful people who maybe didn't always fit that typical relentlessly driven mold.
Okay, so the goal here is to give you some real insights, some actionable tools.
Yeah, to help you tap into that ambition, even when your get up and go has, kind of got up and gone.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts then, this ambitious, lazy dynamic.
Yeah.
When we talk about someone like this, what are we really seeing? What are the defining characteristics?
Well, at its core, it's people who have these significant goals, right? A clear vision of what they want.
Big dreams.
Big dreams, exactly. But they consistently find it hard to maintain the effort needed to actually make them happen.
So it's not that they don't want it.
No, not at all. It's not a lack of wanting or imagining. It's that persistent gap between the desire and the sustained action.
Okay.
You might see these intense bursts of motivation.
Right, like hyper-focus for a day.
Yeah. Followed by, pretty significant periods of inactivity or procrastination.
It almost feels counterintuitive, though, doesn't it? You'd think if you're that ambitious, the drive to work hard would just be there automatically.
Yeah, you'd think so. But human psychology is rarely that straightforward, is it?
Guess not.
For one thing, motivation. It just isn't constant. It ebbs and flows for absolutely everyone.
True.
Plus, the demands of modern life. They can be really overwhelming.
Tell me about it.
That leads to mental fatigue, which, can easily look like laziness from the outside or even feel like it from the inside.
Okay. And interestingly, that feeling of wanting to conserve energy, sometimes that's actually our minds and bodies trying to protect us.
Protect us from what?
From burnout, really. And what's quite insightful from our sources is that this tendency, this being selective with our energy, it can actually be a strategic advantage in certain situations.
Strategic laziness. Okay, now that's interesting. How can, putting things off or feeling unmotivated actually help when you've got big goals?
Well, if you look at it from, say, an evolutionary perspective,
Okay.
the ability to conserve energy while still chasing vital goals, that would have been crucial for survival, right?
Makes sense. Hunt, gather, rest.
Exactly. As one source put it, the capacity to conserve energy is just as important as the capacity to expend it. Think about early humans needing huge effort for hunting or building,
Yeah.
but also needing to rest, conserve resources whenever possible. That kind of inherent balance, it's still wired into us.
Okay, so how does that translate today? Well, today it might mean being more discerning about where you focus your effort. Prioritizing tasks that give the biggest bang for your buck.
Instead of getting bogged down in tiny details that don't matter as much.
Precisely. Channeling energy wisely, not just throwing effort everywhere.
That reframes it nicely. So let's dive into the science a bit. What's actually happening in our brains when we feel that ambition but struggle to get going?
Okay, so a key player here is a neurotransmitter called dopamine.
Dopamine. Heard of it.
Right. It's huge for motivation and our brain's reward system. Dopamine gets released when we anticipate something rewarding.
Anticipate. Not when we get it.
Well, both, but the anticipation is key for driving action. It makes us pursue goals.
Okay.
But, and this is the catch, when that reward feels really far off, like a huge project completion.
Yeah, months away maybe.
Exactly. The brain doesn't always get that immediate dopamine hit. So it's harder to start on tasks that aren't maybe fun right now, but are necessary for that distant goal.
So our brain prefers instant gratification.
Pretty much. And variations in baseline dopamine levels can also affect overall motivation.
Right.
But what's really interesting is we can sort of hack this system by breaking down those huge goals into smaller, more immediate milestones.
Little wins.
Exactly. Those trigger smaller dopamine releases more often, giving you those little boosts of satisfaction that keep you going.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. Explains why scrolling social media feels easier than starting that big report.
Definitely that immediate dopamine hit.
So what are the telltale signs then in our thoughts, in our actions?
Yeah.
How do we know if we're in this ambitious but lazy dynamic?
Mentally, it often looks like having those really grand visions, right? Exciting ideas.
Yeah, the world-changing stuff.
Totally. But coupled with this strong reluctance to actually start working towards them.
Why the reluctance?
Could be a few things. Often an underlying fear of failure. Or maybe perfectionism. That feeling that if you can't do it perfectly, it's not worth starting. It makes taking those first steps feel overwhelming.
That Mark Twain quote comes to mind.
Which one?
The secret of getting ahead is getting started.
Yes. Perfect. And for the ambitious but lazy, that getting started part can feel like climbing Mount Everest.
Right. That fear of not living up to your own high standards.
Yeah.
It's a powerful break.
Right.
So how does this show up in our actual behavior? What patterns might we see?
Behaviorally, a really common pattern is spending a lot of time planning and preparing.
Oh, I know people like this.
Right.
Researching, organizing, making lists.
Exactly. But then really struggling to execute those plans. It's that classic planning execution gap.
Right.
Someone might have, incredibly detailed spreadsheets for a new business.
Color-coded and everything.
But never actually make the phone calls or take the concrete steps to launch it.
There's another quote, Zig Ziglar, right?
Yeah. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great.
Exactly.
And sometimes that tendency to over-prepare, it can almost be a subconscious way to feel productive.
Without actually facing the scary part of taking action.
Precisely. Avoiding the potential discomfort or risk.
Okay, so we've got a clearer picture now of what this looks like, why it happens. But you mentioned earlier, and the sources hint at this.
Yeah.
Can this combination, ambition and this tendency towards, let's say, efficiency or laziness, can that actually be a strength?
Yes, absolutely. It goes back to that idea of being strategic with energy. If your natural inclination is to avoid unnecessary effort, it can actually push you to find the most efficient, the most effective ways to reach those big goals.
So less brute force, more finesse.
Exactly. It can spark innovation, lead to simpler solutions. It might also make you better at delegating effectively.
Because you don't want to do the tedious bits yourself.
Right. Instead of just throwing effort at everything, you're more likely to pinpoint the core tasks, the 20% that will get you 80% of the way there.
The Pareto principle, again, okay, that makes a lot of sense, like a built-in efficiency filter. But surely there are downsides, right? What are the common pitfalls here?
Oh, definitely. A big one is analysis paralysis.
Right, the overthinking trap.
Yes. Because the ambition is high, the desire to do it well is strong. You can get stuck researching endlessly, tweaking plans forever.
And never actually do anything.
Exactly. Perpetual planning, zero action. Finding that balance between planning and doing is crucial.
What else?
Another common struggle is the cycle of guilt and self-criticism.
Yes.
When you procrastinate on things you know you want to achieve, it's so easy to start beating yourself up.
Which just makes you feel worse.
And ironically, often fuels more procrastination. It's a vicious cycle.
So what's the antidote there?
Self-compassion is huge. And focusing on small steps forward, progress, not perfection, rather than dwelling on what you haven't done.
Okay. And you mentioned perfectionism earlier as a cause.
Yes, and it's also a major pitfall in itself. The fear of not meeting those super high standards you set.
Can just freeze you.
Completely. Leads straight back to procrastination because the idea of not getting it just right is too daunting. Learning to embrace good enough when appropriate is incredibly liberating.
Good enough. That's hard for ambitious people sometimes.
It is, but it's essential for momentum.
Okay, so being aware of those traps, the endless thinking, the negative self-talk, chasing perfection and actively working against them.
Got it. Now let's go back to that strength idea. How can we intentionally harness that laziness, that desire for efficiency, to actually fuel our ambition?
It really comes down to understanding that interplay in the brain, between the reward system and our executive functions, our planning and doing parts.
Okay.
If we can design our goals, our tasks, in ways that align with our natural desire for ease and efficiency.
Make it less painful to start.
Exactly. We can make progress feel more organic, less like pushing a boulder uphill. Think about creating systems with really low barriers to entry.
Low friction.
Precisely. If starting and doing a task shifts easy, requires minimal willpower, even someone prone to inertia is way more likely to actually do it and stick with it. Okay, let's get practical then. What kind of productivity systems work well for someone who fits this description? Big dreams, but values efficiency, maybe leans towards laziness.
Yeah, the best approaches tend to focus on maximum impact with minimal upfront effort.
Like what?
Well, the 2-minute rule is a fantastic example.
If it takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now.
Exactly. It stops those tiny tasks from piling up and making you feel overwhelmed. Quick win clears mental clutter.
Simple but effective.
Very. Another surprisingly powerful technique is creating a stop doing list.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
We're always told what we should do, right?
Constantly.
A stop doing list involves consciously identifying and eliminating tasks that don't really contribute much to your main goals.
So cutting out the fluff.
Exactly. It frees up so much time and mental energy for what actually matters. It's about subtraction, not just addition.
That's brilliant. We often overlook the power of just stopping things. What about tech? Any tools that help us work smarter here?
Oh, absolutely. Technology can be a huge ally for strategic laziness.
Strategic laziness, I like it.
Project management tools like, say, Trello or Asana. They let you break down those big ambitions into small, visual, manageable steps. Tracking progress feels good.
Right. Gives you those little dopamine hits we talked about.
Precisely. And then there are automation tools like Zapier, for instance.
Zapier, what does that do?
It connects different apps you use and automates repetitive tasks between them.
Like what kind of tasks?
Oh, things like automatically saving email attachments to cloud storage, or adding new leads from a form to a spreadsheet, or cross-posting social media updates. It takes the grunt work off your plate.
So it handles the boring, low-value stuff.
Exactly. Frees up your brain for the important strategic thinking, and don't underestimate time blocking either.
Scheduling specific work blocks.
Yeah. It sounds rigid, but for people who struggle with motivation, creating that structure can actually reduce the friction of deciding what to do next. The decision is already made.
Just follow the calendar. Okay, so it's about designing your environment, using tools to make action easier, even when motivation is low.
That's a big part of it.
The sources also mention some interesting examples of successful people who seem to balance ambition with a more, let's say, relaxed style.
Yes, some great examples. Historically, you could look at someone like Albert Einstein.
Einstein. How so?
Well, obviously capable of incredible focus, right? But he also really valued daydreaming, leisurely walks, is suggesting it wasn't all just relentless grind.
Interesting.
Or Thomas Edison. Huge output, but known for being brilliant at delegating and focusing his own energy only on the most critical parts of invention.
Right, he didn't build every light bulb himself.
Not by a long shot. And more recently, figures like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs.
Titans of industry, surely they were workaholics.
Driven, undoubtedly. But also known for strategic thinking, effective delegation, focusing on the big picture vision rather than getting lost in every single detail.
That story about Bill Gates' hiring philosophy is fascinating.
The one about hiring lazy people.
Yeah, that he'd hire lazy people for tough jobs because they'd find the most efficient way to do it.
It's a great anecdote, isn't it? It really challenges that traditional idea that only constant grinding hard work leads to success.
It really does.
It highlights that lazy in this context isn't about being unproductive. It's about being resourceful.
Finding the shortcut, the smarter way.
Exactly. Laser focused on efficiency. Achieving the goal with the minimum necessary effort.
Okay, so how do we start to deal with that internal conflict then? That feeling of wanting the big achievements, but also just wanting to, chill out and recharge.
Yeah, that's the core tension. There are some helpful psychological techniques. One is reframing.
Reframing how?
Instead of seeing that lazy feeling as a personal flaw, reframe it as a strategic pause.
Like your body signaling it needs rest or energy conservation.
Precisely. Recognizing you're allowing yourself to recharge for future effort can massively reduce guilt. It becomes a strategy, not a failure.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
What else?
Practices like mindfulness or meditation can really help. They build self-awareness around your procrastination triggers and help you manage those feelings of guilt without getting swept away by them.
Become more aware of the patterns.
Yes, and setting good enough goals. We touched on this.
Avoiding perfectionism paralysis.
Right. Don't aim for impossible perfection right out of the gate. Get something done, then iterate. Building momentum is also key, especially when motivation is low.
How do you build momentum with low motivation? Seems like a catch-22.
Small, consistent routines or rituals help. Just starting the process, even if you don't feel like it.
Like just open the document.
Exactly. Or work for just 5 minutes. Breaking huge tasks into tiny, tiny steps makes them feel way less daunting.
Micro progress.
Yes. Each small win provides a little boost, a sense of accomplishment, which can fuel the next small step. It builds on itself.
Right.
And ultimately, it's about creating systems that work with your natural tendencies, not fighting against them all the time.
Like the automation and tools we discussed.
Yeah, leveraging technology, focusing on working smarter, not just harder, aligning your approach with how you actually operate.
This idea of reframing laziness as a strategic pause, that's quite profound, really shifts the whole perspective. The sources also bring up this lazy genius approach. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. The lazy genius idea is basically a philosophy. It's about being super intentional with your energy.
Okay.
Focusing only on what truly matters to you. It's not about being lazy everywhere all the time.
But being strategically lazy.
Exactly. Choosing where to direct your limited time and energy. A core part of this is the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle we mentioned.
Right. 80% of results from 20% of effort.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
The idea is to identify that critical 20% of activities that yield the vast majority of your desired results.
And then what?
And then concentrate your energy there while minimizing or even eliminating the other 80% of effort that yields much less impact.
So it's ruthless prioritization.
Pretty much. Being really honest about what actions actually move the needle for you and your goals and letting go of the rest.
The source material had a table showing this, didn't it? How some tasks take huge effort for tiny results.
Yeah, it illustrated it well. Task A might be 20% effort for 80% result, while Task C is 50% effort for maybe only 10% result.
So the lazy genius says, focus hard on Task A.
And ruthlessly cut back on or find a much easier way to deal with Task C. Maximize output, minimize wasted energy.
Okay. So for those big someday dreams that feel so far off, how do we start turning them into actual progress without just burning out?
Micro progress is absolutely key here. We keep coming back to it because it works.
Breaking it down super small.
Incredibly small, tiny, manageable steps. It makes the huge goal feel less overwhelming, allows consistent forward movement.
And builds that momentum.
Exactly. Even tiny steps taken consistently build that sense of accomplishment, overcome inertia, and fuel more action. It's about sustainable ambition.
Sustainable ambition. I like that. How does that relate to energy?
It's deeply connected to energy management. Figure out your peak productivity times.
When you're naturally most focused.
Yeah. And schedule your most important, most challenging tasks for those periods. Don't fight your natural rhythms. Work with them to avoid burnout.
Makes sense. Tackle the big stuff when you're at your best.
Right. And finally, building routines and processes that support your goals even when motivation dips.
Systems over willpower again.
Yes. Creating a productive environment, minimizing distractions, making it easier to stay on track even when you don't feel like it. Build momentum that can survive those inevitable fluctuations in motivation.
Okay, so the big takeaway here really seems to be feeling ambitious, but also feeling that resistance to constant action. It's normal.
It's incredibly common, yes. And it doesn't have to stop you from achieving what matters.
It's about understanding that dynamic within yourself.
Exactly. Not seeing it as some deep character flaw.
Right.
But maybe as valuable information, a signal that can guide you towards a more sustainable, maybe more effective way of pursuing your goals.
And the core strategies we've talked about, they really emphasize creating systems, maybe seeking support or accountability.
Building structure, definitely. Minimizing decision fatigue.
And being really, really mindful about where you put your energy.
Yes. And starting small. Consistency over intensity, often. Those seemingly tiny steps add up.
It's about finding that rhythm, that sustainable pace, to bridge the gap between the big dreams and the daily grind without crashing.
That's the goal.
So, as you're listening and thinking about all this, maybe take a moment to reflect. What truly matters most to you? Where can you really focus your energy for the biggest impact? And where perhaps can you afford to be a little more strategically lazy? Maybe that feeling, being ambitious but lazy, isn't really a contradiction after all. Maybe it's more like an invitation.
An invitation.
Yeah, an invitation to figure out a smarter, more sustainable, and maybe ultimately a more effective path towards making those biggest dreams actually happen.